right now. Okay, welcome. Together Thursday, club version. It brings me so much joy to see so many smiling faces. I can't even scroll over. There's about 300 of you in here right now, so that's fantastic. I just want to give you guys a little rundown as to kind of what the setup is going to be, and then we'll get moving. We obviously have two very special guest speakers today. I'll allow Zeka to introduce our first speaker, who is a club alumni, and we can't be more excited to see her smiling face here. What we're going to do is I'm going to leave all 318, 19, 20 of you muted, because otherwise this would be utter chaos. And we're going to go through a little bit of a script that we've talked through and talk about some of the things that these people have been through. If you have any questions, you can put them over in the chat box. You can send them directly to me, and I will do my best to get as many of them answered as we go through. If you ask what her favorite color shoes are, that one's not going to make the cut. With no further ado, I will hand it over to Zeka Neto, our Director of Coaching.
What's going on, you guys? So just to kind of run you guys through a little bit what we're going to do, we'll start now. We're probably going to end about 6:20, like Matt was saying. If you guys have any questions, put on a chat. We'll go over a little bit, let Alicia talk a little bit about her her time at San Juan. She'll talk a little bit about when she was at Stanford. And we'll talk about now what she's doing now, okay? So first of all, I'd like to introduce all of you guys. Alicia Jenkins. She was a former San Juan player. Alicia, I think, if Alicia, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think your first year here was under 12s.
Yeah.
And you came from, what was the club prior before San Juan?
El Dorado.
Eldorado Hills Soccer Club.
Yes.
But Alicia was part of our club, Spirits of 88. She's been with us forever. And she's a player that I had an opportunity to coach and enjoy watching throughout the years that she played here, and got a chance to watch her at Stanford also. So so I'll go ahead and start, Alicia, a little bit, and I think you kind of answered that question already. But so talk a little bit where you're from, and where you started playing soccer.
Yeah, so I am from Placerville, California, actually outside Placerville, middle of nowhere. I don't know if anyone on the line is from anywhere near the area, but now even in Portland, I try to ask if someone knows where that is, and rarely do I get a yes. I started playing when I was 4. I loved soccer, mainly because my older sister played, and I wanted to do everything that she did and try to do it better than she did. It's a little competitive from a very young age. Then as Zeka mentioned, I started playing competitively. I tried out for a U10 team when I was 8. I did not make it. And then I tried out again and made U10s and El Dorado club system, and then decided to go to the wonderful club of San Juan, under 12s. And I was there from then on, really, until I headed off to college. And it was incredible experience. Zeka was one of my coaches there as well, brief period. Missy, you just saw on the call, was one of my teammates, called her my twin. We tried to trick everyone that we were twins whenever we were at tournaments or playing different teams. Challenge was she was about 6 inches taller than me, so the height differential we couldn't really explain. But I think Zeka mentioned a bit, the club and my relationship with San Juan, but hopefully you can tell it's a bit like family, and it's fun, even though you're all new faces to me. Feels a bit like coming home in some ways. So really special to have that relationship, and I have tons of memories, and I know Zeka has some questions for me, so I won't go into all of them.
No, that's good. That's good. So what high school did you attend?
Yeah, I went to Union Mine High School. I don't know if anyone here is from around that area or goes there or familiar with Union Mine, but that is where I went to high school.
Right. So talk a little bit about, obviously, growing up playing for San Juan, a little bit about Well, what was your best memories that you can recall while playing for the club?
I love this question. And I was trying to pinpoint a few. I don't know that I have one best memory. Oh, wow, Matt. Look at that background. It's great supporting evidence of this, but honestly, it's the people and my teammates. Our team was really close, as I'm sure you're all very close with your teammates. And I made incredible friendships and met people I never would have had I not played at San Juan, and that was pretty special. Then when I get into two specific soccer moments, so there's one, Zeka, I remember hating this, but in the long term, I loved it. Playing with tennis balls before practice on the tennis courts. Yeah. One summer, every single practice, right, we would play for half an hour, 45 minutes with tennis balls. Right. And it was always so frustrating. But now, even today, playing in the hallways at work, I'm comfortable playing with a tennis ball, and everyone's very shocked by that. So awesome. That was one very specific thing. And then I think too, you guys probably have them. Do you guys still play at Cherry Island?
No, not anymore.
Oh, okay.
You need to come and visit us. We have one of the most beautiful complex in the country.
Amazing. I'm jealous. Well, I'll say weekend tournaments in the summer. Those are some of my favorite memories. So you think they're torture on the third day sometimes, and it's hot, but now looking back, eating that snow cone when you win a championship is like the best thing ever.
So maybe give us a like not so good memory. maybe one of the most disappointing part of your youth, I guess, you know.
That's a good one. I think one would be losing always sucks in tournaments. It's never fun. I think there are a few losses I could think of in State Cup, but we'll go to one more specific. And it was when I got invited to go to a national team camp. It was under 16s, and I was 15. And at the end of the week, it was the first camp I'd been at down in Southern California, and I'd been really nervous, didn't play my best at all. And the coach at the time was Jill Ellis, who was also later the coach at UCLA, and of course, just retired from the full team. And at the end of it, you have a one-on-one kind of review, and she told me I'd never make it at a top level as a striker, very straight to my face. And that, of course, was pretty hard to hear. And I remember trying not to cry in the middle of that conversation, because hearing that, and that was my dream, to have someone tell you you're not going to be able to do it, is pretty hard to hear. But I think it was nice coming back again to San Juan, my safe place, and building my confidence back. I really had to find my confidence again. And then also realizing that, you know, one opinion doesn't make or break you or tell you exactly who you are as a player. And, you know, keeping up with the work and looking for all the coaching tips that you can and challenging yourself every day, you can get to that level, even if, you know, one opinion after one game, 1 week of playing says you might not be there.
Yeah. So Alicia, I remember this like it was yesterday. Jill Ellis was also the coach at that time that kind of made a statement regarding your playing that you couldn't play at the next level. But she was also a coach that was recruiting you.
Yes.
To UCLA 3 years later.
Yes, right? Exactly.
So it's one of those things that coaches sometimes, you know, they just don't know what they're talking about, I guess.
Yeah, and I think it's that it also sticks in my brain. And I remember having a meeting with her when she was recruiting me and having that in the back of my mind the whole time. But you can't be pigeonholed, and there's always room for growth. And I think that's a big thing to remember. It takes work, though. It doesn't mean that you're just going to get it, but I think to have that positive side and have confidence in yourself too.
Absolutely. So talk about doing the youth, because I remember obviously coaching you and not having you on the field at times was hard for the team, and not only for the team, for the club. I know you had some injuries. I mean, can you share a little bit with everyone, what type of injury
Hmm.
and and what you did to kind of overcome, being hurt?
Yeah, I remember being my sophomore year of high school, I believe. Um, I strained my quad and then I kept playing on it, trying to go to camps and different things and kind of just tried to tough it out and ended up partially tearing it. And it was the first time I had been really injured. And before it had always been something that you could kind of play through. And it was hard. And my parents didn't necessarily know what to do or how to guide me. It's tough. And I think the coaching staff and everyone, my teammates were really supportive, but I had to sit out. And that was the first time I had to sit out and watch from the sidelines. And mentally, when you're used to being someone that's on the field contributing and you can't do anything, that's tough. And finally, we decided with doctors and physical therapists to, go into physical training and therapy. And even though I wasn't able to kick a ball for a long time or sprint, I was able to train and start getting stronger and better. And that was the first time I ever did anything like that. Before it was always just soccer, 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 because that's what I loved. And honestly, it taught me a lot. One, sometimes, and I'm sure a lot of you are experiencing this right now, but you realize how much you love the game when you can't play it. So it taught me a lot about how much I loved soccer and the role and the value that it had in my life. Also learned a lot about the importance of taking care of your body. And I think that it's tough because at some point your body might say, hey, I can't do everything you're asking me to do. And it's really critical to listen to it, even though you feel like you can keep pushing.
Right.
Um, and the rest, recovery training, is critical for success, both
Right.
in the short term and long term.
Right. No, that's a good answer. And then let's talk a little bit about your transition, right? So let's take you out of San Juan now. And I remember actually when you were being recruited by Paul um, at Stanford, I remember talking to you at the time. I thought, obviously, Stanford is a destination for every youth player and anyone that wants to go to a great school. So talk a little about maybe your recruiting process a little bit first,
Mm-hmm.
and then talk about the transition from club to college.
Yeah, I think, and I'll be very honest with how I was feeling during the process, and I still remember it. It was hard. It's exciting, and it's something you've been working towards for a long time. It was always a goal of mine, but it's also scary, and it feels like the biggest decision that you could possibly make. And I just felt this pressure to make the right choice. But understanding what the right choice was is really tough. And Zeka mentioned it, but yes, it was to play soccer, but it's also to go to college and get a degree and education. And you want to have fun too. You want to enjoy those 4 years of your life. So I was all over the place. My poor parents had to deal with me saying, I want to go here. I want to go here. I want to go here. I remember I was about to book a trip to go visit Notre Dame because at that time they had just been in the national championship, really strong program in school. And my father ran me through, okay, great, we'll go. But here's the weather forecast right now. It was November and it was below 20 degrees Fahrenheit. He said, this is how long the trip will take. And you'll probably only come home once or twice a year. And that's how many times we'll probably see you in person. And I said, maybe I don't want to go there. Let's stick to California schools.
Right.
But I was really glad he did that because it helped me think about what I really wanted.
Right.
And then I had the chance to just interact with people at the different schools. And I was looking at Santa Clara, UCLA, Stanford, and Cal after that kind of narrowing of my focus. And at the time, Stanford was actually the worst ranked amongst those. We were not one of the top schools, and the program was just kind of getting some momentum. But I believe we were ranked 27 going into my freshman year. But it just felt right when I went and I could talk to Paul, the coach, as well as the team. It was a great team. They all got along, and they were all really passionate, not only about being the best on the field, but also the best when it came to who they were as people and what they wanted to do kind of outside of the sport as well. And I think with, making the decision for college, it's really important to think through every factor, not necessarily just what the soccer field looks like.
Right.
Because it won't be every hour that you're spending on the field.
Right. Can you touch a little bit on I think one of the biggest challenge for a lot of the young players here in this call is, they talk a little bit about positioning, right? Because, you play for San Juan for all those years. You were a incredible striker, scored tons of goals, right? I think the year before you came here, I remember talking to your dad, and you had something crazy like 100 goals you scored at U12s or something like that.
I don't know.
Yeah, I remember talking to your dad, Rob. So talk a little bit about, playing at the club in one position and then going to Stanford and having to play a different position and talk a little bit about that.
So I, quite frankly, and I changed my point of view, so I'm saying this, but I hated defending. Like, absolutely hated it. I liked scoring goals, and I liked winning the ball back to score a goal for about 14 years of my soccer playing career. Then I went to Stanford, and no longer was I the best person at scoring goals. And it was about whether or not I wanted to play. And of course I wanted to play on the field. And so my freshman year, I started out, I was playing striker, and I didn't score a lot. And so I got bounced around the center mid, outside back, positions I'd never played ever in my life. But kind of just figured I had to try my best, because otherwise it meant I was going to be sitting on the bench. And then going into my sophomore year, we had a lot of injuries on the team, and I ended up playing center mid almost the full year. Again, very different. For those of you that play center mid, you'll know it's very different than playing striker. Or those of you that play up top, you'll know playing center mid and tracking back is very different than hanging out up top. And then my junior year, I got moved to outside back. And then my senior year, I started all of our games as center back. Something that if you had asked me when I was 18 if I would play center back, I would have said absolutely not. And that's where I ended my collegiate career. So I think it's about being flexible and adapting and finding, your own style, no matter what position you're playing on the field. But also being a student of the game, because I had to learn a lot about how you are positioned on field, how you communicate, how you read the game. Because as you all know, those positions are all very, very different. But it was also fun to have a new perspective.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Because I remember one of the biggest challenge for you, talk about a little bit winning a national title. I think as a center back in the final, talk a little bit and kind of going through that, and then talk about your best friend.
Yeah. So, and I'll correct you, Zeka, because it's my heartbreak. We lost in the national championship.
Okay.
Just kidding.
Minor detail.
That's okay. We got there.
Alicia, this is a perfect segue, because we have a question from one of the players, and you can answer it within this. How do you deal with a very tough loss or tough season? So add that when you're done.
Perfect. I can incorporate this also into the question that you had to Zeka about my teammate and friend. I will say that is the toughest loss that I have ever had, for sure. We were undefeated, ranked number 1. going into the match. We were playing UNC. It was my nemesis from my collegiate career, and I knew a lot of the girls on the team, and of course they're great humans off pitch, but really wanted to beat them in that game. And we ended up losing. We had one goal of ours called offsides. You can get into it. Kelly O'Hara, who still is playing on the national team, she unfortunately got a red card. So we were playing a man down for a portion of the game. And then the next day on the San Francisco Chronicle, the front of the sports section, there's a picture of me crying with the bench of UNC celebrating in the background. So the only other time I've been in the San Francisco Chronicle, the only time, is me crying on the front page of the sports section to end my college career. So I would say that was definitely the toughest loss. It still stings a bit. And quite frankly, it took some time to get over that. And I would encourage you guys to read. Kelly O'Hara actually just did an article with the Players Tribune, and she talks a lot about that match in her career and how it's one that stung for her the most, I think, too. But where I found my kind of love for the game again was in a very different place. I went to study abroad in Italy the quarter after that and was invited to go play pickup soccer with Italians locally. And it was just completely different context. It wasn't competitive. It didn't matter if I won, if I lost. They didn't expect me to even know how to play. And so I got to just have fun. And it was a good reminder of why I started in the first place, because I think when you have a loss like that, it can hurt so much that you forget, why you're there. It's supposed to be fun and you're supposed to enjoy it. And yes, there's some tough moments, but always finding that joy in the sport is really, really important.
That's good, man. So let's take the next step. Obviously, you leave Stanford. Talk about your degree a little bit.
Yeah. So at Stanford, I didn't mention this, but I had that quad injury in high school. That was really tough. At Stanford, I actually had 3 surgeries in 4 years. So I had surgery every off season. I would play the full season, and then I had surgery in December, which was really tough, playing through pain. But through that, I ended up studying human biology and sports medicine because I really wanted to understand the body. And it's actually a pre-med major. And I'll get to this, but nothing to do with what I'm doing today, although I try to pull it in every once in a while. But very passionate about kind of youth sports and training and taking care of your body. So that's just my plug. Take care of your bodies, because injury prevention is the way to go. It's way better than having surgeries.
Alicia, one of the questions they were asking, how long was Stanford undefeated that year that you guys lost? I mean, how many games, I guess?
I think we were 25-1. So our one loss was the national championship. I want to say that. And then they went on. So after I graduated, they had a win streak. The next, I want to say it was something like 90 games. So the program has done really, really well with multiple national championships since then.
Right. So let's, the next step, obviously, talk to us a little bit. I mean, we're a club that we have been a sports marketing club for Nike for over 15 plus years now. Nike is our brand. It's what we love here in this club. We love the way they take care of us. Talk a little bit, how do you even Nike came about?
Yeah, it's a funny story. So I went into the pre-med kind of monologue. I was debating going to grad school. And I was working at the Stanford School of Business then after graduating. And I'd reached out to someone who used to work at Nike. And she was then working at Stanford in research. And I was asking her about school and graduate school. And she said, actually, there's a job at Nike you might be interested in. You should just apply. And I said, again, kind of going back to being flexible and going with the flow a bit and what feels right. I did. I didn't hear anything from Nike. And then 3 months later, had an interview, didn't hear anything. And then 2 months later, they said, you have the job in New York City. You have and 24 hours to decide if you're moving and 2 weeks to move. Are you in?
Wow.
So that's where I started with Nike in New York. Really lucky, I think, in many ways, but I had no idea what I was doing, what the job was. I just knew that I loved the brand and I love sports, and I'd go from there.
Right, right. So talk about a little bit about your responsibility now at Nike, or your role is with Nike, and talk a little bit what sort of your job has provided you, because every day I look on Instagram, there's by the way, if you guys want to follow Alicia on Instagram, she's all over the world. Pictures of France and
can up my followers.
Exactly. So talk a little bit about that, what this job has given you, I guess.
Yeah, I think, I feel incredibly lucky. I think one of the questions, so I've been at Nike almost 10 years, and it's how do you stay, challenged and doing things differently? It's a company of 75,000 people, so it's huge corporation all over the world, and there are tons of different jobs within it. So I've now had, I think, 5 or 6 different jobs within Nike, and up to this point in time. So every 2 years or so, I've changed jobs, which is really cool. And right now, I actually didn't include this in my resume. I just switched roles slightly in the last 3 weeks, but I'm working on our global brand team, and we call it football. So I'm trying to say soccer, but I now get shamed if I say soccer in front of anyone I work with. They all make fun of me. Soccer, global soccer, we call it global football, right. The brand marketing team. So what that means is basically anything you see from Nike that has anything to do with soccer in some way, shape, or form, I'm usually connected to it, depending on where it comes from in the world. It might be something I've directly worked on or indirectly, but a lot of it is the stories we tell around products. So the cleats you wear, the jerseys, or players, or different tournaments and big moments. It's a really cool job. And now I'm specifically working on our top athletes and their brand plans, as well as our top professional clubs and our federations. So
can you give us a little bit of what players have you met?
Yes.
Famous?
Yes. That is one of the perks of the job, the travel, I think. And I would encourage all of you, the sport is so special. You don't always feel it in the US, but it is the world's game. And you talk about it, and it's a common language, and it can take you all over the world. So if you like traveling, it can be a language to connect with people. Pick up a ball and try to play with someone anywhere in the world, and almost every time you'll engage with them, even if you can't speak to someone. So I've gotten to travel a lot for work, and then work with some of our top players. So on the men's side, Kylian Mbappe is one that we've been working a lot with. Young, up and coming kind of French player, made a big debut during the World Cup in 2018, as well as Neymar. We know he's been Brazilian guy, has had some ups and downs.
They're tough. They're tough.
Yes, they are. No, he's wonderful. You just can't put him in a box, that's for sure. And then Coutinho, Cristiano Ronaldo, as well, Kevin De Bruyne, and then a lot of our younger players as we're starting to build their long-term strategy on the male side. And then on the women's side, the whole U.S. women's national team, we do a lot of work with, which is incredible. And it's fun to reconnect with some of the girls that I grew up playing with. As well as around the world, it's different. Women's soccer isn't as big or well known, but it's really cool because it's growing massively right now. And so we're doing a lot of work with our English players, as well as the French players and Dutch and Brazilians, and everywhere. So that's been great to see in the last few years. And I'm getting to work a lot with those individuals as they work on growing the game, and it really becomes professional around the world.
That's awesome. And one more thing for me, in terms of being a woman actually in this business, you know, I mean, how old are you now?
32.
So a young woman in this business, I mean, obviously it's a incredible achievement in my opinion, and being in the position that you are representing, you know, all those players and all that. Can you talk a little bit the support that you get from Nike in that regards of, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, and to be very honest, it's oftentimes that I go into meetings or conversations with some of our partners in the game, and I am the only female in the room, and that is very common, especially internationally. US, it's very different, but in Europe or South America, that's pretty common. And my teammates have always been incredibly supportive and helped give me a voice, which has been fantastic. And even some of the doubts that, you know, I've experienced, the second you go play against someone and you're better than them, it helps the conversation a bit once you go into a meeting room. So getting to play soccer against some of the individuals has given me some credibility too, which is great.
That's awesome. So we're going to open up for questions now in the chat. If you have one, Matt, can you start reading the questions now? If you have any questions for Alicia, we're going to spend another 10 to 15 minutes answer your questions, okay?
I got them. Alicia, I want to jump on one that you just talked about. And this is a question from Matt Bernard. As you talked there, you talked about your teammates in the workplace. So how has soccer and sport in general helped prepare you for kind of that part of working within a team?
I couldn't say enough about how it's prepared me. I think you guys have all been on teams. You're all on teams now. I think the best thing about being on a team is everyone is unique and different, but you all find a way to come together and work towards something together. And that's something that you have to do, or else you lose. It doesn't work well when you're playing. That mentality of learning how to work with my teammates on the field has helped tremendously in the workplace. And the last few years have been the most challenging. So on my team now, I have someone from Colombia, our VP's from Colombia, Italian, British, French, two French, Brazilian, American. We're from all over the world, all very, very different personalities. And almost everyone except the British and me, English is a second language. So there's a lot that gets lost in translation if you're just relying on language. And so reading the room, reading body language, just like you do on the field, and also learning how to play to your strengths has been really important. And patience, I think patience with one another. But it's something I'm very grateful for, that I was thrown into that environment with a bunch of different people at a young age, and you realize you can work with anyone.
Great. All right, so somebody asked this question earlier. What's something that you wish you could tell your younger self if you could go backwards?
I would say two things. One, and everyone always said this to me, and I hated it when I was, especially in college, these years will fly by and they're some of the best years of your life. It's true. So enjoy every second of playing, of high school, of college, if you play in college, or if not, and just love the game. And I think that's my second point. And, you know, one of the questions that you guys had sent through was about playing at Stanford and also the academics. And one thing I would have told myself at Stanford is to have more fun, because it was a very intense environment, both from a sports standpoint and also school. And I forgot sometimes to take a step back and remember the joy of why I was there and how special it was. So I would say to find those moments, even if you're in a grind, or if you don't want to go to practice, or if you want to sleep in some days, or you don't want to go train by yourself, just think about how special those things are, because they really are awesome, and find what you enjoy in them.
How did you find trying to balance the academic and athletic side? I would say let's start with, and I'm kind of veering a little bit on these questions, but through high school with obviously your aspirations of the schools that you listed, right? So you obviously needed to have good grades. And then when you were at Stanford, how did you manage?
Yeah, I think high school, it was a non-negotiable with my parents. Sorry, that was my entry point to being able to play, was doing well, but I also enjoyed it. I really loved school in high school. I had to have a routine though, and that was something that was really important between practice and training and friends, just knowing the spaces where I really had to focus on school, or else I couldn't almost progress to the next thing. If it was going out with friends to the movies or just sitting around and doing nothing, I had to get my homework done first. But having that hour or 2 hours every day to really focus on school, knowing that I got to do something fun later, or doing it after practice, and knowing that I needed to focus and finish it after practice. And then Stanford, it was interesting because suddenly you're not the smartest person in the class or even close. It was a very humbling experience. And you realize that you have to figure out what works for you, and that you have to find different ways to learn. And for me, it meant, going to have one-on-one conversations, or going to different lectures, or reading something twice, whereas before I could just skim it. So I think Stanford, it was kind of learning to explore different ways of learning. That was really important, and not to judge myself against others, but more to myself.
I have a question for you, since obviously you grew up in the middle of nowhere by your own, mission. Were you Diamond Springs, Placerville? Where were you?
Outside Diamond Springs.
Okay, so outside Diamond Springs. So somebody asked, how did you keep yourself motivated, especially, when it was super time consuming, trying to balance hanging out with friends, but also I would ask, how did you do it when you were isolated and you didn't really have, I presume, a bunch of people next door that you could go play with?
Yeah, that was, I would say, pretty tough. As far as, my school environment, I didn't have any connection to from a soccer standpoint. Everyone I played with lived in Sacramento or Folsom or El Dorado Hills or Davis. So I almost had two different identities, my home school identity and then my soccer identity. And I think it was just a matter of, my teammates really kept me energized through soccer and the people that I got to play with there. And then coaches would give me tips. Zeka, I know you gave me some tips on what to do in the driveway. And I would play a lot by myself in the driveway. I'd just blast music and just kick a ball around and juggle. And that was kind of my own free time. And I got to just enjoy that.
Hey, I'm going to have a follow-up question, Alicia, on that.
Yeah.
What would be the message now that you will give to every single player here during this time right now? None of us are able to train, obviously. What do you think? What do you recommend, and maybe a message to all of them, during this time? What do you think they should be doing now?
I would say set some goals for yourself about what you want to achieve during this time, both just individually, but soccer specifically. Some really tangible things about, maybe it's juggling, maybe it's something there, maybe it's number of touches, maybe it's your first touch, and it obviously depends on your environment. But I would say set some targets. What do you want to be able to do in the next week? What do you want to be able to do in the next 2 weeks? What about the next month? And try to work every day to get to those. And also find the time and the space that you enjoy doing it, and then make it a habit every day. And sometimes I think we overthink it. And usually once you get your shoes on, once you get the ball out there, it's fun. But if you're having a hard time getting motivated, sometimes that's the hardest part. So just say at 9 a.m. every day, or 7 a.m. or 5 p.m., this is what I'm doing, no matter what. And then you'll get out there, you'll know what your goals are, and you won't even have to think, and your body will get into it. And then you'll just be moving. And before you know it, you'll be like, all right, I did it. I achieved what I wanted to.
All right. Z, you got any more before I read some of these other ones? Nope. He apparently is gone. All right. So we got a really, I know who this came from, so I know it's a smart person, but how do you communicate efficiently on branding and marketing with a huge department that is spread across the world?
Whew, good question. A lot of video calls. That is not the most efficient. Yeah. No, I've actually been on a crusade a bit within my team to build more effective meeting culture. But I won't go into that with you guys. But I think it's knowing the work that you want to get done or the message you want to get out there, and then knowing the audience that receives that information and what you expect them to do with it. So one of the biggest things is when I'm talking to our business partners, they are so focused on how much we're selling or how the business is doing at Nike. When I'm talking to the team that is their artists, basically, the creative directors, you show them numbers and they literally will just stop listening to you. Like, I don't want to hear anything about this. So I could be talking about one thing, the exact same thing, and the way I have a conversation with the head of sales is completely different than how I have the conversation with our creative team. So tailoring that message and thinking about from their point of view what they need out of it to get motivated. I'm sure you guys know how to do that with your siblings and your parents. You talk to your parents in a different way than your siblings and your friends. It's kind of the same thing, but in the work environment.
Awesome. What's your favorite project that you've worked on so far with Nike? I know I see your Instagram and you've traveled everywhere, and I comment every time you're at a game. I wish I was at. So, what's your favorite project you've been on so far?
Yeah, I think this last summer for the World Cup was by far my favorite project. I think I came to Nike wanting to work in soccer eventually. I had 4-5 jobs before that. So I worked in a bunch of different areas before I got to work in soccer. And we had never done a campaign before for the Women's World Cup globally. We'd done a lot in the US, but never before around the world. And a year before we started working on it, and I got to lead a lot of that work. And there was a lot of doubt as to whether or not people would, be excited about the campaign or even care. And we had, we took some big bets, but we ended up doing this whole campaign, a big ad on TV. In the moment that we went to the match between the US and France, and French culture was, at that time, I'd done a lot of research in France before. They didn't even know there was a World Cup 3 months before they were hosting it. And there was a lot of negative sentiment. But at that match against the US, the stadium was sold out, and the French team and their fans was singing and cheering like you were at a PSG men's match, like you were at a French men's team match. And after they lost, they stayed there and they cheered afterwards for the team because they were so proud of how they performed. And for me, that was a moment of the world's changing and the perception of soccer globally is changing. So I would say that was my favorite campaign to be a part of and to see that kind of firsthand.
Awesome. Good technique there, by the way.
Thank you.
We have a question from the McDougall household, and I've clarified, was this from Matt or Missy? Who was your role model growing up, and what did they offer you that maybe you still take with you today, or has any of that changed? Does that make sense? I did a bad job of reading that.
Yeah, Missy, first of all. I'll say Missy.
That's what I said too.
Definitely. She's always smiling, and I think that is such a good thing to remember. Put a smile on your face. No, but in all seriousness, I think I've never been someone to have one role model. I think I've always looked to different places for a different inspiration. From the soccer field, Mia Hamm, 100%. It was the time I grew up, and she was my role model from on pitch standpoint. And I think in many ways, I still really look up to her and that whole team and how they led the way in this country for soccer. And then now I would say there's a lot of different people I work with and interact with, from players to different leaders at work, that I try to take things that I really admire from people and adopt them and tailor them to how I'm working or how I'm interacting with people. I like that interruption, Matt.
Yeah, well, luckily I was muted, but yeah, that's my, he must have escaped over the gate. You can't hear him screaming on the other side of the house now, which is nice. All right, let me go through. We got a couple more questions because we have a hard stop with Alicia at 6:20 because she has to continue to solve the Nike World problems. How did you persevere during some of the hard times? And I know you hit on this before, but you obviously had a bunch of surgeries and some challenges that suck, frankly. How did you overcome that, and what was kind of your driving force behind it?
I would say two things. One, and they kind of had to balance each other out. One was my long-term goal and confidence that I would be back, and I would be back to starting on the field. So I always had that in my mind, no matter what, I would get there. But then I had to almost forget that and focus on the little wins that I had, because when you can't walk, it's really hard to imagine playing a full 90 minutes again. And so focusing on, okay, I have my range of motion back. Now I can walk. Now I can squat. Now I can jog. And just taking things in small increments and celebrating those little wins along the way, being a critical piece.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to go maybe one or two more questions, and then we'll let you obviously go back to life. This has been awesome, truly. So from Elham, you said Stanford wasn't ranked very highly when you were being recruited. What made you feel like that was where you wanted to be and that it was the right fit for you? I
think, I mentioned it briefly, but I had the chance to go play, with a regional team, with a national team a few times. And I'd frankly been in team environments that I didn't feel confident or comfortable in moments. And there was something about when I went to Stanford that I could tell the team really got along and cared about each other, while at the same time being incredibly competitive and driven. And that was the most important thing for me, because I knew that I would have the most fun playing and I would be the best player I could be if I felt confident on the team and like we were in it together. So it felt right. And that's, obviously it was a great school too. So I didn't feel like I was sacrificing on that side. I was really lucky. But at the end of the day, it just felt like the best fit. And the coach, Paul, was fantastic. I could just tell that I would do well working with him. And he's obviously done really well since then too, because he has a great ability to, bring teams together.
Yeah, he's done okay. He's done all right. I guess so. This will be the final one, because then I know you need to get moving, and we'll get our next presenter on. Great. All right. Has the coronavirus and obviously what's going on globally and locally how has it impacted you guys, either you specifically at Nike or Nike in general?
Yeah, and we talked about, Zach and Matt and I talked for 30 seconds about this, but it's had a tremendous impact, both, professionally from plans, but also from how I work every single day. So from a professional standpoint, and share this with this group, but everything we do, we call it the pulse of football or pulse of sport. But Nike is all about being connected to what's happening in the sports world. And of course, when sport on the professional level stops and at the youth level stops, in many ways, it kind of causes us to have to think, oh, we have to do everything completely differently. And, it's really scary and it's hard to see what the world is going through. On the positive side, it's been really inspiring to see how players, teams, individuals at Nike have just rallied together to see what in the world they can do that's positive and fun and can bring sport back into life, even though we can't go play out on fields altogether. So our whole focus now has been on, what can we inspire kids to do, parents, everyone at home, and how do you have fun at home while you can't necessarily go out and go about your team. So some of our athletes, stay tuned. We'll be issuing some challenges in the next few weeks as well on what you can be doing at home while you're inside, but keeping sport kind of part of your life.
Awesome. Zach, are you still here, or did you pass out?
No, Alicia, I wanted to thank you, but I want to challenge you. I think we as a club, we want to challenge you now. And here's the challenge for you. Whenever you're in Sacramento, you have to stop by at the complex and say,
deal. I love it. My sister just moved there.
Because we want to make sure that you get to meet every single player that was here today and say hi, because obviously this is your club. This is where you grew up playing. We love having you a part of our alumni, you and Missy. I'm not going to leave you out. And it's been a pleasure for sure having you on. So
thank you, and hopefully didn't bore you too much with my long answers, but truly awesome. Appreciate it, and thank you so much for.
Can you guys give Alicia a thumbs up, please? Because y'all muted. There you go.
If you know how to do it in the app, you can actually go do it and thumbs up there.
Ooh, I need to learn that.
It's if you go down to the reactions button, Alicia, you got thumbs up and clapping. So down at the bottom.
Find it.
Yeah,
hey, Matt, you want to announce the next one, and then Alicia can jump off. Alicia, thank you again.